Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Advisory Committee meeting on Plants and Animals. I am Han Lau, Plant Pest Control Branch Manager at the Hawaii Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity, and I will be chairing this meeting.
So for IT, for the Zoom meeting, if you're joining via app or browser on a computer or mobile device, if you'd like to speak, just go ahead and click on the raise hand button and we will, when it's time for you to speak, we will call upon you to talk to us. And then for those who have joined us over the phone, you can do *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to mute or unmute.
Thank you, Kevin. And in the event that connectivity is lost and attempts to repair the connection exceed 30 minutes, the meeting may be terminated or continue to another date and time. Please consult the webpage for updated information. Testifiers are reminded that there is a 2-minute limit of testimony per agenda item. If there is anyone testifying in the room, please be sure to come up to the mic and identify yourself before you begin. Okay, moving to item number 1 on the agenda, call to order. The meeting is called to order at 1:01 p.m. Okay, second item on the agenda, introductions. Roll call. I will take a roll call of the committee members present. When your name is called, please verbally acknowledge your presence and confirm whether or not you are alone in the room. If you are not alone, you will need to identify anyone who is 18 years or older who is also in the room with you. Now, this also serves as a roll call vote. For each subsequent vote, I will ask if there are any objections or abstentions. If there are none, then the motion will be approved on the same basis as this initial roll call. Okay, so I start with myself, Han Lau, PPC Branch Manager, present. Greg Takeshima.
Present, no one in the room with me.
Patrick Chi.
Is he not here?
Patrick, I thought I saw him logged in just now. Is Patrick Chi in? Oh yeah, there you go.
He should be as a.
There you go, Patrick.
Hello, Patrick Chi, Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry and Wildlife.
Are you alone?
Yeah,
I am
Patrick,
alone.
are you alone?
Yes.
Thank you. And Maria Hawes.
I'm here. I'm also alone.
Thank you. Sam Gong.
Present, and it's just me here.
Thank you. Joshua Fisher.
Present, and I'm alone in the room.
Thank you. Pam Mizuno.
I don't think she was going
Oh, she's excused. Okay, so Pam is excused. Tom Eisen.
I'm here and all alone in my cubicle.
Did I mute it? Yeah. No.
Okay, so moving on to item number 3 on the agenda, requests for review and recommendation by the Advisory Committee on Plants and Animals. Public testimony will be heard after each item. As a reminder, please limit your testimony to 2 minutes to allow all testifiers to participate. Please follow the prior instructions on providing testimony. So presentation by staff.
Wait. Oh, did you say what the agenda item is?
Oh, it's please.
Did you just?
Please.
Usually they read it.
This is just for Trenton.
Oh,
Trenton.
you don't read the agenda item on this?
Try to read it.
Oh, Trent will read it, okay,
May I have Trenton from
sorry.
Plant Quarantine Branch?
Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm used to the other board.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Trent, you need to unmute.
Yeah, Trenton, please. Yeah, you gotta unmute Trenton.
Did you?
He raised his hand.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, now we can.
Thank you. Aloha, Chair, committee members, Trenton Yasui, invertebrate and aquatic biota specialist for the plant quarantine branch. Today I have one request to present for your review and recommendation. The submittal and appendices and attachments have been provided to you in advance, so I'll be summarizing the request in the interest of time. The request is as follows. We have a request to, 1, allow the collection and possession of the following organisms on the list of restricted animals, Part A: Anemonia manjano, an anemone; Bartholomea annulata, an anemone; Diadumene lineata, an anemone; Discosoma nummiforme, a corallomorph; an unidentified corallomorph in the family Discosomatidae; Capnella spicata, a coral; Cariola rizae, a coral; and Eunomia stolonifera, a coral, by permit for scientific research by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, National Marine Fisheries Service. And 2, establish permit conditions for the collection and possession of the following organisms on the list of restricted animals, Part A: Anemonia manjano, an anemone; Bartholomea annulata, an anemone; Diadumene lineata, an anemone; Discosoma nummiforme, a corallomorph; an unidentified corallomorph in the family Discosomatidae; Capnella spicata, a coral; Cariola rizae, a coral; and Eunomia stolonifera, a coral, by permit for scientific research by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, National Marine Fisheries Service. So the applicant for this request is Dr. Jennifer Sampson. Dr. Sampson's permit application is included as Appendix 1. The following information was taken from Dr. Sampson's application and subsequent written communication provided by Dr. Sampson and the responsible person for the project, Dr. Andrew Shantz. Dr. Shantz is in attendance today to answer any questions. Dr. Shantz is a coral reef ecologist with 20 years of experience as an aquarist and more than a decade of experience working with marine organisms in research labs. Dr. Shantz's CV is attached as Appendix 2. The NOAA Pacific Island Fisheries Science Center Ecosystem Science Division conducts multidisciplinary research, monitoring, and analysis of integrated environmental and living resource systems in coastal and offshore waters of the Pacific Ocean. The proposed project aims to collect the aforementioned organisms to develop environmental DNA, eDNA, markers for screening for non-native species in Hawaiian waters and assess potential impacts on native species. Over the last 4 years, multiple non-native species have been detected in Pearl Harbor. These potential alien invasive species, AIS, could have substantial detrimental effects on Hawaiian coral reefs and the native species they support, including many endangered and protected animals. The proposed project supports multiple parallel objectives to: 1, assess the risk that non-native marine species pose to Hawaii's unique marine environments, and 2, develop tools for managers and users to more effectively prevent the spread of non-native species and control invasions. The impacts of Eustolonifera, pulse coral, have not been assessed in Hawaiian waters, but this soft coral has been reported to rapidly overgrow invaded reefs in the Caribbean. However, the extent of use Stolonifera currently documented in the Pearl Harbor suggests the species has a potential to overgrow large swaths of Hawaiian reefs should it escape from the bay, with potential negative impacts on protected coral species. In contrast, the effects of A. manjano, B. annulata, D. lineata, and D. nulliforme are expected to be minimal. These species have all been documented in Hawaii and have the potential to negatively impact our other corals or cnidarians in their immediate vicinity, but rapid spread and major adverse impacts on reefs and reef-dependent species have not been observed. Similarly, sea spicata and corallimorphs such as the unidentified Discosomatidae that have been found in Pearl Harbor have been reported to overgrow sections of reef in the Pacific, particularly under nutrient-enriched conditions, although spread has generally been slower and limited with regard to spatial extent. To assess impacts on native species, NOAA will conduct surveys in Pearl Harbor to assess spread. Long-term monitoring sites will be established to better understand rates of spread and impacts from and or resistance to the non-native species. eDNA samples will be collected to test and validate existing eDNA-based tools and to develop new eDNA tools. Various native and non-native species will be collected to establish mock communities to develop efficient protocols for eDNA extraction to validate non-native detection and assess detection limits. The safeguarding facility for this project is NOAA Pacific Island Fisheries Science Center, located on Ford Island, Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hickam, which is a secured military installation. The facility is a controlled access federal building, and only employees with the Department of Defense Common Access Cards, CACs, are allowed in office and laboratory areas of the facility. Front desk security is required to check all employees for active CACs. After passing through security, laboratory spaces must be accessed by scanning CACs at entry points, and only staff with programmed access for specific areas are allowed into those spaces. Collected organisms will be kept in up to 10 individual aquaria with recirculating artificial seawater. Each week, the systems will receive a 10% water change. Water removed from tanks holding non-native species will be passed through a number 30 sieve into a single 200-liter container and combined with bleach to reach a 20% bleach concentration. The bleached seawater solution will be held for 48 hours. Any remaining bleach will be neutralized before the water is disposed of. Any biological material caught in the sieve will be submerged in 30% bleach/freshwater solution for 3 hours, air dried for 24 hours, and disposed of with other biohazardous waste generated at the IRC facility. Vulture specimens will be stored in ethanol for preservation with the Bishop Museum and Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. DNA will be preserved at the Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center. All remaining tissue or live colonies will be submerged in 30% bleach/freshwater solution for 3 hours, air dried for 24 hours, and disposed of with other biohazardous waste. All collective organisms, water, or other contents of the aquaria that come into contact with conducted species will be contained and not introduced to the wild. This request was submitted to the Advisory Subcommittee on Invertebrate and Aquatic Biota for review and recommendations. The responses can be found on pages 15 and 16 of the submittal. 2 of 4 subcommittee members responded and both recommended approval of the permit request and the proposed permit conditions, which can be found on pages 17 through 20 of the submittal. Thank you.
Thank you, Trenton. May I have a motion to approve?
Nobody?
A motion to approve.
Patrick, thank you, Patrick. And may I have a second?
Second,
Thomas.
Oh, thank you so much, Thomas. Okay, is there anyone from the public who wishes to provide testimony? No. No one. Okay, committee discussion.
I noticed that one of your respondents, Friola, was concerned about biosecurity elements in the and labeling. Were there any adjustments to the permit details to deal with that?
Modifications have not been made to this point. With regard to Dr. Friola's comments about labeling the tank, that is a condition that we can put into the proposed conditions to address that issue. The second, regard to the applicant's biosecurity procedures or protocols, that is something that we will, require of the applicant prior to issuance of permit. I have yet to do a site inspection of the facility, so that's something that I wanted to address when we get to that point.
Okay, thank you for that response. I noticed that that there was a recommendation of approval despite those two points, and I presume that approval was pending, dealing with those aspects.
Sam, I saw that too, and sorry, Greg, I see your hand up. I think that's something I commonly see with laboratories when they talk about biosafety, and they're really focused, especially with aquaculture, they're worried about things coming into the lab and affecting their stuff. And it's usually sometimes it can be misinterpreted because when we think of biosafety, we're actually really concerned with the biosecurity of things getting out. And I felt satisfied with what I read, but I did see that is a common approach people do. It's the biosafety of the lab, but we are concerned with the biosecurity of the outside environment.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Josh. Greg, you have your hands up.
Yeah. Just a couple of things. In terms of the permit conditions, Trenton, for number 5, I had noticed that how will DAB how will DAB be aware of who's trained or certified, right? They say trained or certified personnel, right? I think there should be some type of list or something like that submitted to the either DAB or PQ. And then with number 7 and 13 for the permit conditions, without an EPA registration number, back to pesticides, that the quote unquote bleach, right? The applicant doesn't know if label requirements are being followed. That's something that they should probably nail down in terms of what specific bleach product they're using.
All right, thank you, Greg. Patrick.
A couple questions. Has the environmental assessment already been done for this, or is it not required? I mean, they mention it, but I'm not entirely sure whether or not it was done. I couldn't figure it out from the materials. The other question is also somewhat related to the biosecurity one. Is, we all know where the NOAA facility is. It's right on the ocean. Are there any safeguards in place? Should there be potentially a tsunami that might come and inundate the building? Would the samples and whatnot of these species still be, biosecure and not escape should that happen?
I can ask the applicator to respond.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. And is the applicator online to respond to some of the questions being asked? Yeah, Andy.
Andy, for the record, could you state your name and affiliation?
Yeah, my name is Andy Sean. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Cooperative Agency for Marine Science.
That's the one.
And I am a
The Airbus.
Just a minute, Andy, just a minute. I'm hearing feedback. If anybody, for the rest of you not talking, can you please?
Or there's another one coming, another BTS for tonight?
Can we find out who is on mute?
Oh, and you're looking for somebody for that.
Trenton, could you mute, please?
Yeah, Trenton is mute.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Andy. Could you please proceed?
Yeah, so my name is Andy Shantz. I'm with the Cooperative Institute for Marine and Atmospheric Research at NOAA's Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center. And I am happy to answer any questions about this project. To address Patrick's, I think I can say that the facility is on the ocean. It's actually right next to where this eunomia infestation is. So we have to go by it every time we take our small boats out to sea, which is why this is sort of an important priority for us. I think in the event of a tsunami, we would probably be able to get in there. Last time we had a warning, there was plenty of time at the lab, so we could probably go and dispose of the organisms, add bleach to those tanks to make sure that if we did lose it, and we could add something like that to our permitting language, I believe.
So before we move on, Patrick, do you have anything to add or anything you want to say to Andy?
Oh, well, he didn't answer the question about whether or not there's an environmental assessment that's already been done, or if that is not a requirement at this point.
I will pass that off. Actually, Justin Rivera, who is one of our permitting officers, is also in the meeting, so I might pass that off to Justin.
Justin,
for the record, could you state your name and affiliation?
Test. Yeah, hi, this is Justin Rivera. I'm from NOAA's Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center and am the permit coordinator on this application. Yeah, to answer the question, yeah, we have done a NEPA analysis for this work. And so we can provide that documentation if the committee requires it.
And there was a finding of no significant impact, or?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the question from Greg before. He was asking about label requirements, the specific brand of bleach used. Andy, do you think you can answer Greg's question?
Yeah, we've traditionally used Clorox bleach for our BMPs. That's the same protocol we follow for concern about chondria. The DoD has also been dealing with eunomia eradication for quite some time. They actually don't use bleach. They only use fresh water and air drying. But we did want to add that in there just as an extra precaution to have the bleach.
So, Greg, do you have any more questions for Andy? I mean, did he answer your question?
Yeah, that that answered my question for the most part. I did have one more, if I may.
I'm gonna circle back to Sam first. I also make sure that Sam's concern was addressed. Thank you, Greg. So, Andy, to address Sam's concern earlier on, do you have anything for Sam about the biosecurity plan?
Yeah, so all of our lab access to the different components of the lab needs to be approved by people who have taken all of the lab safety training courses. Because each lab has a common access card that's required to access it, you actually have to take those training courses, meet with whoever's in charge with the lab, and get clearance to access it before your card will be programmed to open that door. So we're happy to provide a list of those people if that was something that was asked. I can't remember if that was part of your question, as well as labeling the tanks in the room, just so everyone is clear if for some reason someone did get access, that they would be aware that these are non-native species that are in there. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Andy. As Josh mentioned, a lot of those protocols are meant to prevent things from getting into the lab that are undesired. And I'm presuming that your training also includes making sure that things that shouldn't be out of the lab remain in the lab.
Yes, absolutely. We do have all of that included in our biosecurity training protocol.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Thomas first and then go back to Greg. Okay, so Thomas.
Yes, thank you. See, regarding the environmental assessment issue, which was brought up in the application materials that HEPA applies pursuant to a court decision, talk about how a NEPA EA was done with the FONSI, but that in and of itself does not satisfy Chapter 343. So while HEPA is very similar to NEPA, HEPA is not automatically satisfied with a NEPA document or a NEPA determination. So that pretty much leaves the question of satisfying HEPA still open. So I think that needs to be addressed. I would say that it's certainly possible that this is an action that could be exempted from the requirement of preparing an HEPA EA, but that exemption is it's an affirmative determination that some agency, presumably DAB, would be making. So just wanted to clarify all this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Andy, any response?
I would probably have to defer to Justin, our permit coordinator, on this one. It's something that I wasn't aware of, but I'll certainly look into that.
Justin.
Yeah, so we could do HEPA as well. I would yeah, I'd have to go check in with our council on how to do that. But yeah, we could definitely write up a HEPA analysis relevant to this action.
Yeah, certainly reach out to, I'm with the environmental review program, so we kind of be at the center of it, and certainly you can reach out for information and guidance. We don't have the ability to make any determinations, but we certainly help facilitate agencies and applicants going through the process. But just based on, it wouldn't have caught my eye if it wasn't in the application that, because it seems like it's a federal action, but with this court decision, it kind of jogged me into recalling that yes, HEPA would apply. And so you can reach out to the Environmental Review Program, part of the State's Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, and we can give you some support on going through that process.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. And with that, I'm going to go to Greg. Greg?
Okay, thanks again, Andy and Justin, for being here. My one question kind of comes from the actual application, right? So in the name address of your shipper, it notes that the collection method of species will be collected during scuba diving operations within Pearl Harbor. Are there any biosecurity measures, collection methods, any other details that you folks can provide to the committee that'll reduce the risk, of spreading the collected specimens, right? We recognize that they are already in Pearl Harbor, but we don't want it to get worse just from the collection of them. Is there circulation patterns of the environment within Pearl Harbor, or if you could provide us with who would be collecting the samples and how they're qualified to collect the samples, something that gives us a better idea of standard operating procedures.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. We could definitely provide a list of the divers who would be in the water collecting them. They're all trained NOAA divers. We would follow the similar BMP that the DoD contractors have been using for removal. So they'd be picked up by hand, sealed in collection jars, and then those would be placed in a canvas bag by the divers, taken back up to the boat. All of the gear is going to be decontaminated afterwards. We have BMP in our standard operating protocol. At least I'm not sure if that made it into the permit, but all of the gear gets soaked in fresh water overnight. The boats are not put back into the water until they've been completely inspected and hosed down. So I'm happy to share that information, and then we could update the protocol with that as well. Thanks.
All right,
Perfect,
thank you. Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Greg. And so I'm going to go to Maria.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to comment that as an aquaculture specialist who runs several hatcheries and has worked a lot in wet labs holding various types of organisms, I thought the biosecurity protocols were, I think, more than adequate in many ways. I think if the addition of the labeling is added, I think it's going to be probably more than what's required to assure that there's biosecurity and these things aren't spread. I should mention, 20 to 30% bleach concentration is actually very, very high for this kind of work. We normally disinfect with 5% bleach or less, and that's considered adequate for most applications. I would say, though, that just to allay any fears, it might be good to visually and microscopically document that there's no living organisms or cells left once the treatment has been done. The other thing I would just mention is that depending on who's working there, it sounds like you're vetting your personnel and you have a list of people who've been trained. It's just, it can be common to mix up bottles of stuff in your hatchery. So if you just make sure you really are applying bleach and not something else, and that's why I think the post-treatment visual observation is going to allay some fears. But I after reviewing this, I didn't have any concerns about the biosecurity procedures. Thanks.
Thank you, Maria. So any more questions, comments from the committee? All right, if nothing, I'm going to call for a vote. Are there any objections or extensions or abstentions? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item on agenda. It's going to be a presentation by staff. And we have Jonathan from the plant quarantine branch. He's the manager. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, committee members. Jonathan Ho, plant quarantine branch manager. We have a request to review a petition from Megan Lamson and Leila Kealoha of Hawaii Wildlife Fund and Poaku Pelemaka to initiate administrative rulemaking to implement an interim rule pursuant to HRS 158 9.5 to restrict the transportation of CRB host material, which includes that very long list of items. From the designated CRB infested area on Hawaii Island to any other area in the state, and then to restrict the transportation, receipt, processing, sale, barter, donation, giving away of those same items within the CRB infested area by requiring a permit or compliance agreement with the intent of slowing or containing the spread of CRB on Hawaii Island. The second part is to find that is to have a finding that the existing regulations in Chapter 4-72 HAR related to the transportation, the long list of CRB host materials, is insufficient to contain or slow the spread of CRB on Hawaii Island, and that creates a situation dangerous to public health and safety or to the ecological health of flora or fauna present in the state and constitutes an emergency which justifies an interim rule. And a finding that the adoption of an interim rule to further restrict the transportation of CRB host material is, the long list is required to prevent the spread of CRB. To containers and to containers slow the spread of CRB on Hawaii Island. So just a quick background. CRB has been around since 2013. been found it's established essentially on Hawaii Island. I'm sorry, Oahu and Kauai, and with an existing outbreak in West Hawaii Island, and then with detections on Maui and Lanai, and the obviously ongoing eradication program in Kona, in the Kona area. We've done permanent rules with and interim rules with the most recent one being for Molokai, interim rule 25-1. So January 12th, this petition was received by the chairperson's office, and the board reviewed it at its January 27th meeting. And ultimately, the board directed the branch to go through the rulemaking process and to bring it back, to bring the petition back before the board at its March meeting. So procedurally, in order to get an interim rule, the advisory committee must, well, sorry, there's the initiation of rulemaking, excuse me, the initiation of rulemaking can be through petition. There are specific requirements that are substantive requirements for a petition for consideration. This petition does have those, meet those substantive the substance of the petition for consideration, and it was presented before the board at its January meeting. And then in order to implement a rule, the committee must have a finding that there's that the movement or importation of flora or fauna in the absence of rules is creating a situation dangerous to public health and safety or to the ecological health of flora or fauna that is so immediate in nature as to constitute an emergency. And an interim rule cannot be effective for more than a year. I think that sentence in that paragraph, it's like a double negative, but an interim rule cannot be effective for more than a year. And then should the rule be adopted, there is a requirement to publish it in newspaper of general circulation within the state within 12 days of issuance of the interim rule. So essentially, this interim rule proposes to enact a requirement for people who essentially transport, sell, move, give away CRB host material, which is, plants, palm plants, green waste, potting materials, and any other type of decomposing organic plant materials from and within a designated area on Hawaii Island. And the petitioners have provided a very specific area to which this restriction or this requirement would be enacted. Figure 1, which is provided by them. This area is the same area that has been used for the voluntary compliance agreements in the Kona area. And it was chosen primarily for geographic identification, that it uses specific roadways to manage the area. So it's very clear which things are going to be covered or not. Their interim rule is similar to the one that was issued for Oahu in interim rule 22-1, in that it does exempt a very clear list of items, things for food, processed, unsprouted seeds. So there's a clear list of things that are not covered by the rule. And at the initial meeting at the board, the branch had some issues as it relates to the way the petition was laid out. Sorry, not the petition, the interim rule and the compliance agreement were laid out. So we were able to meet with them, it was on the 5th or the 6th of February, and kind of really get to, I think, what their intent was and how they saw it moving forward. So we worked with them to really clarify some of that. And we were able to work on creating, I think, unfortunately, they're not labeled Appendix A and Appendix B and C, which is the branch's proposed compliance agreement and interim rule, which are at the back. I don't know why we don't have the labeling, but those were there. And again, they're based very heavily off of the petitioner's initial proposals that they had worked on. The petitioners have done quite a bit of outreach, and their testimony does indicate additional changes to the compliance agreement and the rule based on their interactions with folks. So I haven't quite gotten the opportunity to really kind of go through it with what the branch has provided. But ultimately, the recommendation from the branch is that we recommend that the committee make the finding that the existing regulations are insufficient, and that they're insufficient, which is creating an emergency, which would necessitate the need for the interim rule, and that the committee find that the rule is necessary to help curb the spread of CRB. Because this is an advisory committee, and I think obviously there's quite a bit of, work still that needs to be done on both the petition and the interim rule. And clearly the petitioners want to work with us to get to a place where I think it works for everyone. We will have to, obviously the PQ will work with the petitioners to obviously go through what they provided against what we have drafted for the committee, and then to provide to the board, I guess a combination of both. But in the initial review that I was able to take a look at it, there's not a huge amount of difference between the two. I think there are some sticking points as it relates to some access, some of the training requirements. But I think the majority of the things are more they're not necessarily deal breakers. They're more just clarifications that I think we can work through to get through it. And I think that those things should not impede the ability to move this request to the board and for the committee to be able to make the finding that's necessary for the board to make a determination for an interim rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. May I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
All right. Thank you, Greg. And may I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Patrick, thank you. Okay, is there anyone from the public who wishes to give testimony?
We do have three. Meg, for the record, could you state your name and affiliation?
Aloha, am I on there? Okay. Aloha Advisory Committee members, this is Megan Lamson. I'm the program director testifying on behalf of Hawaii Wildlife Fund. And my apologies, I thought we had 5 minutes based on the agenda, so I will try to keep this quick. But we are one of the 2 petitioners for interim rulemaking to regulate the transportation of CRB host material on Hawaii Island. And before I speak to the substance, I want to acknowledge something super significant that Jonathan alluded to as well. This petition has received hundreds of testimonies in support, submitted both to this committee and to the Board of Agriculture and Biosecurity's meeting last month from agencies, farmers, conservation organizations, representatives, and community members across the island. And so just stating this because that level of response is really a clear signal. This is not a fringe concern, and it's the community calling for action. And now why this rule means most to us. CRB poses a catastrophic threat to Hawaii Island's native ecosystems. It bores into the crowns of palms to feed. And while coconuts often come to mind, the damage doesn't stop there. The unrestricted movement of CRB host material creates direct pathways for this pest to spread into native habitats that have no evolutionary defenses against it. Hawaii's native lolu palms are only indigenous palm genus, and the ecosystems that depend on them are directly in the line of fire. These are irreplaceable species, deeply embedded in the native forest ecosystems from Mauka to Makai, and highly vulnerable to a pest like CRB. Once CRB establishes in an unmanaged native area, eradication becomes effectively impossible. So we are now 9 months into the Kona infestation with no mandatory regulatory framework in place, and we're on our third voluntary compliance agreement. And unsurprisingly, this tactic is not working. So every day of delay is another CRB host, is another day that the host material with CRB can move freely, carrying the risk of range expansion into native ecosystems beyond the current range. So the proposed interim rule that we provided is targeted and reasonable. It requires commercial operators in the infested area to enter into compliance agreements with the department, implementing heat treatment protocols, staff training, regular inspections, and proper storage methods, all through the support of BISC and not taxing our state agency. It is simply best management practices. It doesn't shut down businesses, and it is not a quarantine. So our version, I think one difference between our version and the one provided by the agency is that our version creates a designated collection bin system that also benefits operators and biosecurity efforts. And in closing, while we recognize the cultural, economic, and agricultural stakes are also enormous, the ecological urgency can't be overstated. Losing native palms and the forest ecosystems they anchor is not reversible. There's no second chance once CRB reaches unmanaged native landscapes at scale. We urge this committee to move this petition forward to the board for adoption on March 24th. The community's spoken loudly and in hundreds. The science is clear and the rule is ready. So the time to act is now. Mahalo for your time.
Thank you, Megan.
We have Jody. Please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Aloha committee members, my name is Jody Roseanne. I'm also with Hawaii Wildlife Fund. I serve as the plant program manager for Hawaii Wildlife Fund. So I'm also speaking to you as one of the petitioners. First and foremost, I wanted to mahalo you guys all for the hard work you do, and especially for moving forward the interim rule that's right now keeping Molokai free from CRB. And it's good timing for you guys that this comes to you now because you're very familiar with this process. I was reading through the submittal provided to you by PQB, and I wanted to just touch on a few points. First off, as Jonathan mentioned, after the board meeting in January, we met with PQB to address any of those questions or concerns. We were able to come to an agreement with any issues that were brought forth regarding our compliance agreement and in turn our interim rule. It was very productive, as the submittal states and as Jonathan states. So thank you, Jonathan, also for providing that updated draft of the compliance agreement and interim rule to the committee. But I do want to emphasize that the following week we had another meeting with stakeholders, businesses operating within the infested area. That was a 4-hour meeting. We went through the compliance agreement point by point to answer any questions that businesses may have had and to adjust our compliance agreement as necessary to make sure that it was workable for the businesses. We, the petitioners, incorporated all of those changes. And in our written testimony that we submitted this week, we gave you guys several documents, 2 of which were the red line copies of all those changes made from our initial submittal in January that incorporated the changes we made during our meeting with PQB and those of the business owners and stakeholders, both for the compliance agreement and the interim rule. The other documents we submitted were cleaned up versions that just make it easier to read, but the red lines are better for you to compare. So as the petitioners, we really want to be clear that we request that you review these documents today rather than the one provided in the submittal, just to ensure that the comments from the stakeholders are included. We are very open to working with PQB in the next few weeks before this goes to the board to make sure that everybody is in agreement. The primary additions really were not major. They were changes in timelines from the time of inspection to the time of transportation that was based on stakeholder input. And as Megan mentioned, an addition that came forth during that meeting in regards to designated collection bins and a few other small clarifications. I also really want to emphasize that this is not a quarantine. We removed any word of quarantine from our compliance agreement and interim rule. It's just simply best management practices to help reduce the human spread of CRB from the infested area. PQB has also stressed us their challenges with resources, and we totally understand and we're sympathetic with that. Therefore, BISC and CRB Response and other partners have really contributed a lot to the development of this compliance agreement. BISC and CRB Response have offered to take the lead on compliance trainings free of charge. So as written right now, the interim rule and compliance agreement intentionally take the burden off PQB as much as possible, because we know that you guys are stressed thin, and especially when you're facing a challenge like an invasive species response. Submittal also brings up that the interim rule on Oahu was not effective. I just want to bring up the point that let's remember that rule was adopted nearly 10 years after CRB was established on Oahu. It was also much larger. It included the entire island versus a small area like Kona. Also, keep in mind that as CRB detections expand and the infestation expand, there is language in the interim rule to address incorporating that expansion. We really believe our model can and will be successful. So thanks to Jonathan PQB for recognizing that the CRB infestation is indeed an emergency. We agree with the suggestion to adopt this revised interim rule as soon as possible. And I hope that you committee members support us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody.
Oahu's, please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Aloha, can you hear me? Very good. Can you
Yes.
see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Aloha mai kako, olela ke aloha ko ino no Puna mai au. I am Leila ke aloha from Puna on Hawaii Island. I just want to say mahalo to each and every one of you for your service and your time to serve on this committee. And I stand before you today with my kupuna and the generations before me, as well as my children and my unborn grandchildren. I am the executive director for Pohaku Pelemaka, our nonprofit that is located on our Puna coastline. Our mission is to protect and preserve and enhance the natural and cultural resources along our Puna coastline, as well as Native Hawaiian well-being and the transmission of intergenerational knowledge and practices in partnership with our families, our ohana, the government agencies, and the public and private sectors. We are fortunate to be the stewards of some state and county land in the Ahupua Malama, which houses about 12 acres or 1,600 new trees. We have been in that space. I grew up in that area. My family comes from that area for generations. And so we're very fortunate to be in that space. We are one part of the Puna coastline that has thousands of new trees. And I just want to express the importance of what new means to us. We are currently collecting the morphological scientific data on these 1,600 trees to look at Hawaiian varieties of new. And with CRB now being found on our island, with a voluntary compliance agreement, a voluntary agreement to stop movement, it hasn't really, it's like a faith-based, oh, please don't do this kind of thing. All right, so I'm very thankful to Hawaii Wildlife Fund for being the co-petitioners on this. And as mentioned before, I'm not going to go over all the things that Megan and Jody talked about, but it's imperative that we do something. And even Jonathan stated that an interim rule is only good for 1 year. So it's crucial that during this period, because I'm hoping and I'm assuming that we're going to move this forward, that during this interim rule period that we create the actual rule. We work with NIU now and the Community Coconut Program for Kulunani Program, and this work with our NIU across our islands. And we're at a state right now on our island that we can actually stop this, right? So it's critical that we do something about this. And I want to share that we just hosted our first new festival this past weekend in collaboration with Oihana and Auntie Monulani Myers, Dr. Myers, and New Now folks, and we shared the New Forever film. That day, Laura Casio, I just want to say thank you to her because she works with our mayor, Mayor Alameda, actually created a proclamation and stated that on February 22nd is now recognized as New Forever Day. And so the new is something that's, like I've just shared, very significant to us as a people, and not just to us in Puna, but across the Pai'aina, across our islands. And so we need to do something, right? And this is the beginning of that process. So I really just want to say thank you very much. And thank you, Jonathan, for working with us on this. We spent the last 6 months working on this. You know, and if it takes the next 6 months to get an actual rule, while the interim rule is in place, we're here to do that. And so I just thank you all for your support and for your time. Mahalo.
Thank you, Leila.
We have two more speakers. Chris, could you state your name and affiliation for the record?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, right on. Aloha mai kako o Chris Lono ka ia kapu ko inoa no Hanapepe Kauai mai au. So I'm coming from Kauai. I represent the Hawaii Ulu Cooperative, a group that has over 220 farmers, most of which are on Hawaii Island, many in Kona, many on the east side. And I'm also part owner of the business called Coconut Cultivation LLC on Kauai. And I'm also a Native Hawaiian. So I think I have a unique perspective in this issue, being a stakeholder in the agricultural industry, being a coconut climber, and being a Hawaiian who cares. And I being on Kauai as well. And I just want to share the perspective from someone who is in the coconut trees and who has been on the front lines of this issue. And when the interim rule that restricted breeding material transport from Oahu inter-island, when that expired, within 1 year, we saw the arrival of CRB on our island on Kauai. And life has never been the same for me. It's been front lines, battling, watching trees that I care about decline, watching trees being removed, watching trees being poisoned, watching mulch and breeding material get demonized in our agricultural community, watching fighting and disagreements within our community. And the spread has been rapid. In certain areas on our island, we see 80 to 90% damage of the palms. I'm watching trees on my side of the island get hit that I've never seen before. I'm watching this beetle spread daily, essentially. And we're hearing things like the endemic Lolu species that exist nowhere else in the world, only on Kauai. They're now threatened and being damaged by CRB, as if they didn't have it hard enough, as if they weren't critically endangered already. And including the National Tropical Botanical Garden in Lowai, which is the largest collection of Lolu palms, is facing dire situation and spending on tens of thousands of dollars in otherwise unnecessary measures. We're watching coconut trees get injected with poisons and people avoiding or being skeptical of eating coconuts now. We're watching keiki and families getting poisoned unknowingly. We're watching people sell and give away coconuts unknowingly known that they've been poisoned. So this issue, it's so complicated, and I can guarantee it will only get more complicated and more expensive if we don't address this now. And I wish that the interim rule that restricted inter-island transport had been extended, had been more strict, because the situation we're facing now in Kauai is dire. Bringing it back to Hawaii Island with the agricultural industry, a lot of the farmers that I talk to on the daily basis are really concerned with this. They're, what am I going to do with my mulch? What do you mean? I'm not going to be able to use mulch. What about my coconut trees? People, I get calls every day on Kauai and my tree's being hit. What do I do? And as a climber, I can tell you there's not much that I can do. I can go up there and I can sand and salt, and I can do organic measures, and I can spray. But the fight is on the ground. If there's one thing I can emphasize, the fight is on the ground with the breeding material. And this is such a common sense rule. We need to restrict and be more strict with how breeding material is moving around our islands. And that's what I've heard in numerous presentations over the years from specialists who have been working with this beetle across the Pacific for over a decade. There's one thing they emphasize: the fight is on the ground with the breeding material. And yeah, so mahalo you guys for your time. Please support this measure.
All right, thank you, Chris.
Stephanie, could you state your name and affiliation for the record?
Aloha, Chair, members of the Advisory Committee. My name is Stephanie Easley with CGAPS, the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. Thank you for your service on the committee and for all the work PQB has done on this agenda item. For full disclosure, I have worked with the petitioners on preparing their documents, and I'm familiar with those documents. I see in the agenda there's 3 requests for this committee related to this agenda item. The first is the review of the petition. I'm not exactly sure what this committee is intended, if that's intended to move a particular set of documents to the Board of Agriculture and Biosecurity for their review, or if you're going to look at the language of a specific set of documents. As Jonathan noted, there are 3 sets right now. There's the original petition and interim rule submitted by petitioners back in January, the modified red line version of the petition of the interim rule and compliance agreement submitted by the petitioners in their testimony that includes the changes based on the discussions with Branch Chief Ho and the stakeholders at the stakeholder meeting. And then there is an additional 3rd set at the end of the packet, which is PQB's. If you all do decide to move a set of documents, specific set of documents forward, I hope it will be the red line version that includes all the changes. It does have the designated collection bins. It has other methods of treatment. It includes HOA specifically, which is something the stakeholders wanted. And there's other things that have come to light through conversations with impacted groups that are in that are not in the other 2 sets of documents. Quickly, the second finding the agenda asks you to make is that the existing rules in Chapter 472 are insufficient. In our written testimony, I put an outline of the 3 sections that I think may be related to that finding. There's sections 472.4, 5, and 23. If I can provide any further information, just let me know. But the gist of it is, there's nothing in Chapter 472 that is a comprehensive program to deal with the human-assisted spread of CRB through host material on Hawaii Island. And that is what is the emergency situation that urgently needs an interim rule to address it. And then finally, just wrapping up, that we hope you can make that finding that this is an emergency situation and the lack of the effective rules creates that emergency, so that this can continue to move forward. Thank you very much, and I'm here if you have any questions. Mahalo.
Thank you, Stephanie.
We have 2 additional speakers. Wayne, can you state your name and affiliation for the record?
Yes, good afternoon, committee members. Wayne Tanaka with the Circle of Hawaii. Very strong support of these interim rules. We want to thank the advisory committee for taking the time to meet and to consider them. I can't emphasize enough how much of a dire situation we're in. I mean, it's hard enough. It's obviously hard enough to contain CRB within Kona, but if this beetle lands elsewhere in Hawaii Island and Hilo and other places where there's going to have to be a lot more habitat, then its establishment is going to be pretty much inevitable. So just happy to answer any questions, but otherwise just full support of moving forward. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Wayne.
Indrajit, could you state your name and affiliation for the record?
Aloha, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Indrajit Gunasekara. I'm a co-founder of New Now, and I'm joining you from Oahu. And first of all, I'd like to thank you, the committee, and the work you're doing. Also, Jonathan Ho, for his leadership and his willingness to work with such situation and being able to his willingness to work with us, especially. I mean, we saw in the similar petition that you supported in the Molokai and how much it has the impact on retaining the island and safeguarding the coconut diversity there. And one of the major part of us as a new now we are working on is understanding the ancient varieties of Hawaiian new, the Hawaiian coconut trees. And there are so much work to be done, nearly last 10 years. During our works, we witnessed the struggle and the hardship that people face because of now due to CRB. And we saw some of the trees that we planted are being lost within last 4 or 5 years. But we cannot take that as a discouragement to not to do what we do. And we strongly support this petition. And I see that each day we wait, it's a day that potentially can be endangered and threatened. And hope is still breathing. Hope is still breathing. Don't sit too long. Please take this seriously and let's make this rule. Let's make this happen. And mahalo for your time, man. I just want to thank you. Aloha.
All right, thank you very much, Indrazit. So any more from the public who wish to give a testimony? I see none. Okay, so committee discussion. All right, Josh.
I guess just for me, just like as Miss Easley brought up, the clarification on the three proposals. I get that emergency exists, that the existing regulations are insufficient, and then number three, the adoption of the interim rule. I guess is that the adoption of, I guess, which draft interim is it? Like what are we that one would in the future that they would come together and that they would finalize one? Is that just an interim rule would be generated versus the exact language of what is presented before us?
Right. So what the committee needs to have is basically the number 2 item on the agenda, right? That finding that there's a lack of rule that constitutes an emergency that justifies interim rule. So the specific language of the interim rule and the compliance agreement aren't necessary. There does need to be consensus, I guess, as to which particular document wants to be moved forward. Like Stephanie had said, right? There's 3 versions, and I think obviously the committee can kind of choose one to recommend. Or we got to work together and come up with something, because I have a feeling that's probably going to end up happening after this meeting. Obviously we're going to work with the petitioners and I think, drill down on a few things else, because I think there's a little bit more work that can be done. But I think to the extent of whether the committee wants to have a specific document recommended, there's no requirement for that as it relates to the critical part of the interim rule, which is the finding of the lack of rules that's constituting the emergency that's justifying the rule. That's the critical part. The other two, so like number 1 is realistically, like on the agenda, the item 1 is for notice, right? So that the public knows that what the committee is doing. And number 3 is to kind of help create the language that or to facilitate specific language for the board. But number 2 is the one that's really required in order to get it to the board. Because if there's no finding of an emergency, the board cannot implement the interim rule. I hope that clarifies that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jonathan. And I guess for me, for the number 3, the adoption of the interim rule, And I really appreciate your work, Jonathan. It sounded like all the petitioners, they really appreciated your working with them. And I guess it would be good for a final I guess an agreed upon document between the petitioners and you is what is presented to the board.
I'm in agreement with that.
Okay, thank you, Josh. And next, Thomas.
Well, I want to thank Jonathan for providing that clarification because I think we all had similar questions about that. I certainly have no problem with making the finding that there is this critical situation because, of course, it's totally happening. I guess something I'm trying to wrap my head around is that a lot of this, what we're doing is moving from the voluntary compliance agreement. And I'm trying to wrap my head around what didn't work about that, because a lot of the new compliance agreement seems to be fairly similar. And was it just the fact that it was voluntary, or did it not drill down into enough detail? So I'm hoping that whatever the final compliance agreement is, it actually works, because we need to do something that works to stop this problem. But yeah, thank you. But let's get it to the board as quick as possible.
Yeah, so I think the goal with this is trying, as the petitioners had stated, it's trying to balance, I guess, the regulatory function and what I think trying to do more than what's currently being, I guess, mandated. And for PQ, I only have 3 inspectors in Kona, and historically, the way that we deal with quarantine is you're using, for all intents and purposes, as close to an absolute a measure as possible. So obviously, we witness treatments, or we're going to be witnessing things. We're going to be subjecting commodities to treatments that are completely, or that have been shown to be verifiable in eradicating all life stages and things like that. And this does not really, so this is kind of a departure from how historically that we've worked with that. But that being said, the need to find another way, or to find a way to balance the lack of resources against the ability to get more work to be done. This is something obviously the branch hasn't really done before. And I think to the extent of it being reasonable and feasible, I think I don't think that's I believe that that is the case as to what the petitioners have provided. And I think obviously they've spoken to industry, and obviously there's nobody from industry here, so I'm assuming that they are on board with it. And I think if they're on board with it and they're able to do it, obviously that's going to be beneficial. And I think to the extent of what the department is doing, I think the regulatory portion, obviously because we don't have any people, it doesn't quite align with how we normally do it. That's one issue, but I think there's ongoing treatments that have been going on particularly in the ag park. We're doing fumigations, we're trying to get rid of green waste, we're trying to get rid of a lot of that inoculum in addition to trying to manage the spread from areas that we know CRB are there. So I think this is like another part of the puzzle. And again, we're going to find a way to make sure that this, everything gets lined up so that the board gets a single document. They're going to get all of this, unfortunately, because that's part of the process. But they are going to get a finalized document between us and the petitioners, and then so there will be a singular vote for everybody to agree upon.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thomas, does that answer your question? It does, yeah. Okay, thank you. So moving on, Patrick.
I definitely think that there is an emergency, and there isn't enough rules in place that can currently make the coconut rhinoceros beetle issue not a problem. So, I mean, part of the question is, in addition to this interim rule, will rulemaking be started almost immediately in order for us to put into place something that, could be potentially helpful for, future movement of CRB related materials. And I also think that there's definitely a need for us to move this, towards the board for the interim rule in order to stopgap at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, so I think as it relates to permanent rulemaking, I think we're gonna, I guess, if we can show that it's effective, I don't see why we shouldn't. And I think that's always going to be, I think, the biggest impediment to some extent. But that shouldn't prevent us from doing what needs to be done now, which is this. Yeah, and again, I think should this be deemed effective? Obviously, this is the blueprint for what we're going to be doing moving forward for other places. So,
and this is a compliance agreement. It's not something that's set in stone per se, right? So it's something that, hopefully the community, once they, are working with it, can give feedback and can be adjusted, for, should it be working for everyone or not, right? So.
Correct, and again, and I think to the extent of, I think when you're doing in terms of agreements and or permits, this is not necessarily a permit, but I guess it is from a legal standpoint. But anyhow, you're really trying not to adjust them in real time, just because it just makes it more complicated, I think, for the people to comply. But again, I think. And Kona has the advantage, I guess, to some extent, in that a lot of these things have been identified before, obviously, that they were on Oahu. So I think the likelihood of them being used and implemented and being effective is much greater, as opposed to what we were doing initially when CRB was on Oahu. So yeah, I think, I'm generally an optimist, and I hope that this will be effective, because I don't necessarily want to be doing more work with CRB. But yeah, I think we can do it, and we can, we'll move forward to make sure it gets to the board and
well, besides the fact that this is a measure not necessarily meant, to, I mean, we'd like it to be eradicated, but, it may not, be the silver bullet in order to, prevent it from going, further. But, we're trying to slow it down, right? And, give us time in order for us to potentially have other tools in place that would give us the upper hand and potentially beat it back into, being not as much of a threat. So.
Yeah, in agreement.
Okay, well, thank you, Patrick. And let's move to Sam.
Mahalo for that. Everything that I've heard so far, I'm in agreement with the idea that what exists is insufficient, and that we need to move forward. The third point, I'm satisfied now that what will happen between now and the board meeting is that DAB will get together with the petitioners and ensure that what goes before the board is to the satisfaction of both. So with that, I'm ready to vote, but we'll listen to what Greg has to say.
All right, thank you, Sam. Greg.
Thank you, Chair. We always recognize that there's always a fine balance between outreach and education as well as enforcement, right? It does seem like we need to ensure that there is an appropriate amount of enforcement in the testimony and in the packet, there's a lot of the outreach is going to be done by the petitioners, and just in general, just want to make sure that while we do want to work within industry, and we understand that that is a very important part, without the enforcement side, it's going to be basically like that voluntary stop movement, right? It's going to be on your best behavior because it's the right thing to do rather than the enforcement. Realistically, that's kind of just the point I wanted to make at the end.
I mean, granted, if there's someone who's not going to comply with it, then that's when the hammer needs to fall, right? So, I mean, whereas
Right.
voluntary, we didn't have that hammer before. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you, Greg. And any more from the members of the committee? All right, if not, I am going to call for the vote.
So just to clarify, the vote is to make the finding in in two.
Two.
And then because when the motion was made, it was early on, so it looked like you were approving the department's version, but now the committee is approving having the department work with the requester to come up with a form of the compliance agreement for the board using this testimony and what you guys have.
Yep.
And everyone's okay on the committee is like okay voting on that. Okay, I just want to make sure it's clear because it's gonna have to be in the minutes and after the fact and everyone's gone, we can't clean it. So
No, thank you for that
Thank you, Jen.
clarification.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that was good to point. That was good to point that out. Similar to the Molokai move, we wanted to make sure that what was sent to the board was the full set that the petitioners had done. But the fact that the petitioners are working closely with you, Jonathan, and seem very pleased with your work with them, I have confidence that you'll be able to put something together for the board.
All right, thank you, everyone. So call for the vote. Are there any objections or abstentions? All right, hearing no objections, the motion is approved. Okay, moving on to the last item, adjournment. May I have well, thank you, committee members and public participants. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, thank you,
I'll
Sam.
second.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And
Josh.
Josh.
oh, Josh, sorry, Josh.
I'm sure
Josh,
Patrick
oh,
has my back.
Yeah,
Go
I'm
for
too
it.
eager to go. Sorry. Okay, so the meeting of the Advisory Committee on Plants and Animals is adjourned at 2:22 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And thanks for the petitioners and those that testified.
Yeah, thank you.
Definitely heartfelt and compelling.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Absolutely.
Take care.